Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff. I'm joined, as usual, by my good friends Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Richard and Michael debate, deliberate, argue the Mount Rushmore of any given topic. And this week, that topic is the Mount Rushmore of film score soundtrack creators or composers who were in bands. And with us to help discuss that, in fact, debate against the unified team of Michael and Richard, is Ryan Pak. Ryan Pak is the host and creator and producer of Soundtrack Your Life podcast. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a delight. And I would love for you to describe to our listener a little bit more of what your podcast is all about.
So Soundtrack Your Life is a podcast where I interview a guest every week, and we break down a soundtrack that they have a personal connection to, where they have some sort of story that connects them to the soundtrack. And, we'll usually kind of do a deep dive into, some of the bands or, whatever connects them to the film. We usually do some sort of deep dive, and we kind of bounce back and forth between their stories and just kind of facts about the soundtrack.
Cool. So the creators of film soundtracks and scores are often from the realm of of musical scoring, of creating music for orchestras and whatnot, and may study that. But we're going to be discussing those folks who find that occupation, but have started off in bands. Is that right, guys? Am I describing it correctly?
Yeah, you've got it right.
Okay. Where are soundtrack creators and scorers and composers supposed to come from? Is it from they're all supposed to go to the Berklee School of Music or studied classical composition and arrangement? Is that true?
Well, I live in North Hollywood, and across the street from North Hollywood High, literally I can see it if I look out my window, and John Williams is maybe the most famous person, unless you consider what's her name? Blossom. Who is the character? Who is the actress that played Mayim Bialik? I mean, or Cuba Gooding Jr. But John Williams is kind of our most esteemed graduate of North Hollywood High, and that's where they come from. They come from right across from Big Time Burger and the Taco Bell. That
Okay,
we often go to when we're just like, I don't know what we're going to do for dinner. Go to Taco Bell.
Yes.
But I don't know. I mean, I think you're right, Jeff, though, that they come from a deep well of musical knowledge, and not necessarily from some ska band out of Orange County.
Yeah.
Our friend Kaz Boyle, who we know from Kickball, is now a big time music composer guy, and he has an extensive, composing. His background comes from kind of classical music in that world, I believe, as well. So yeah.
Okay, well, this will be a fun discussion, and as we go, we can maybe take a look back at, I don't know if it's film history or not, but that time in which the demands of the music that goes along with the story that we're seeing on the screen had become to be met not by people who are classically trained to compose for an orchestra, but schmucks who were in a band. So this is a opportunity for Ryan to go up against Michael and Richard, who are unified in their struggle to best him and defeat him. But we'll see what happens. So you are our guest, Ryan. You are our visitor. So you will go first. What's your first choice?
So I'm just going to shamelessly plug my podcast because we recently did an episode about this specific composer.
Awesome.
So my first pick is Trent Reznor,
Cool.
formerly of Nine Inch Nails, or still currently in Nine Inch Nails. But now he is famous for scoring such films as The Social Network, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary. And he just won an Emmy for The Watchmen, the HBO show, series.
Yeah, he's also on our list, Jeff.
Oh, he is.
So
All right.
a dual pick.
Okay. Ryan, why did you pick Trent?
I picked Trent Reznor because, a lot of the music I listened to growing up was from the 90s, so Nine Inch Nails was a big part of that. The Social Network score won him an Oscar, well, he and Atticus Ross, that's kind of his partner in crime. He's also done movies such as Gone Girl and The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Bird Box, and he's actually doing a new Pixar film, which will be out later this year.
That's cool. Do we know that Trent has any kind of background in arrangement or composition for the cinematic kind of milieu? Did he ever learn all that stuff in school, or was he a band musician who taught himself to do that other stuff?
He was in high school band, I believe. He was also in the theater department. He was the lead in The Music Man at his high school, which I find kind of hard to believe. I'm sure that he, grew up taking piano lessons and stuff, but he doesn't have a background he didn't go to college, and he doesn't have a background at like some fancy conservatory or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So unlike Johnny Williams, who conducted the Boston Pops or Boston Symphony Orchestra for a long time and has probably a very confident presence in front of an orchestra, Trent is somebody who is creating these musical soundscapes for the film and may need somebody, like you said, Atticus Finch, to kind of help him translate into...
Atticus Ross.
Sorry. Atticus Ross.
Atticus Finch is the guy from...
Jim Scout. Well, that's cool. I would say he is, in all his music endeavors, a very a creator of very powerful cinematic soundscapes, even in his pop and even in his band musical output.
Yeah, and I think if you look at something like the Social Network score, which was the first score that the two of them worked on, and as Ryan said, they won an Academy Award for. It's very electronica driven. It's a lot of kind of ambient noise, and there's a lot. What I find really cool about that score is the use of silence. I think the silence in the score is almost as important as the notes that are being played. I think it's in the same way that you talk about an artist using negative space. I think in the same way, I think a lot of Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's soundtracks kind of play around with that idea of, how do you create tension by not having notes and not having music? Mm-hmm. And where does the pull and tug kind of come in between those elements?
Mm-hmm.
Richard, I find that fascinating.
Richard, I appreciate that you went for the Lisa Simpson listen for the music that they're not playing consideration for this sort of music. But
I'm very intelligent.
I'm kind of the Lisa Simpson of the group, so I think that makes sense.
Okay, a cool first choice actually for both of you, Trent Reznor and he and Atticus. What's his last name? Ross's score for the Social Network. Let's move on to Richard and Michael. I guess it'd be your second choice. What's that?
Sure. Our second choice is the band Daft Punk scoring. They have only composed for one film that I know of, which is for Tron Legacy. Oh, yeah. And I can't think of a more better one-off pairing of like a pop or rock musician with a single film. Just get in there, do everything that you need to do, and then get out. I mean, these are two guys that French electronic musicians who have been playing French electronic musicians since the kind of early mid-90s, kind of like in this robo kayfabe, constantly wearing these big robot helmets no matter where they go. I've seen like one picture of them outside of their gear, and it's like some kind of crappy promo shot from 1991 or whatever.
I saw one photo of them where they're playing ping pong.
Yeah, I mean that's about it. But the pairing of, I wrote to Richard. I said, if you can imagine a movie about computers with music by people that dress like robots who make computer music, I mean, you've got the exact perfect pairing. And the music isn't all electronic. It's it's heavily scored like a true kind of cinematic movie would be, but it just fits so perfectly and so nicely. And it's interesting to think of them coming into a sequel, and the woman that scored the first Tron movie, her name was Wendy Carlos. She's like the partial inventor of the Moog synthesizer, and she'd only scored a couple other films, A Clockwork Orange and The Shining. And to have like those three, The Shining is very silent in that same sort of way. There's a lot of just like kind of ambient string noise in that. But to come into like this very iconic movie and follow the person who basically kind of helped create your career in synthesizer music, I think was very ambitious. And I think it's really cool to see people kind of stretch what they do from like a pop or rock or electronic standpoint into like a full cinematic endeavor. They're still only writing music in 3-4 minute bites at a time, but you're still writing for a scene. You're writing for a mood. You're not necessarily writing for something that goes on the radio and is over after a few minutes.
This is a fun choice. I love the score. I love Daft Punk. I love the score, and it is fascinating to considering that the original Tron film is a character who kind of becomes digitized and sucked into this electronic world. It does feel like in their evolution to disguise their identity, I think the Daft Punk guys immediately just kind of started by wearing goofy masks, and then that I think might have even been the byproduct of stage fright. It seems like kind of an affectation now, and we see guys like Deadmau5 and all these other jamokis who are these big celebrity DJs put on a big mask or a helmet like Marshmallow or something like that and make yes, they're making a big show, not unlike David Byrne in his gigantic suit. But I think those Daft Punk guys were just kind of scared to be on stage, and they thought, well, maybe if we put these silly masks on, it might kind of help us feel more anonymous. But they did turn into robots, just like the characters in the movie Tron. And then I think it's kind of fascinating, like you said, that it almost seems like they were born to do this. But they do credit Wendy Carlos, born Walter Carlos, by the way, another person who transformed themselves. Yeah. And Max Steiner, the huge 30s and 40s score creator, Bernard Herrmann, and I love John Carpenter in there too. So as being influential for them in this score. So that's it almost seems like the thing that they were meant to do, and it sure made that Tron Legacy a little bit more hip, at least in my eyes when it came out. So that's a fun choice. Are you familiar with that score, Ryan?
Yes, I am. My friend walked out to one of the Tron Legacy songs for his reception, and then he cut the wedding cake with a legitimate samurai sword. So I feel like that was very on brand for him.
That's great. That's super cool.
Wow.
What I do respect about Guy Manuel and the other dude, Thomas Bangalter, but it does seem like their cred in like dance music and R&B and hip hop, like they know all that stuff. That to know that they also kind of know something about soundtracks and scoring is pretty cool too. What were you going to say, Ryan? I guess to add on to that, so their last album, Random Access Memories, which won a boatload of Grammys. I believe they kind of made that album to show that they're more than just electronic musicians, that they understand the music behind their music. I believe like they got the drummer from Michael Jackson's Off the Wall sessions to play drums. Nile Rodgers co-wrote a couple songs. He's worked from everyone from Diana Ross, David Bowie. Puff Daddy sampled him a bunch in the 90s. So they're very, I guess they're very musical, and they're very and they use the last album to kind of show off. They got Giorgio Moroder on there, and then they really like the Strokes, so they got Julian Casablancas as well. Okay, Ryan, it is your job to tell us your second choice.
Well, since Richard said that he is the Lisa Simpson of the group, why don't we go with the guy who created the Simpsons theme,
yes.
Danny Elfman.
Oh,
Also
cool.
on our list too.
Awesome. Why did you choose Danny?
Danny Elfman might be one of my favorite composers in general. You know, he's done everything from Pee-wee's Big Adventure to Good Will Hunting. And then obviously he created the Simpsons theme, which I love.
Yeah.
He's done so many movies that I'm familiar with. I believe he's credited now for composing over 100 soundtracks, and a huge Nightmare Before Christmas fan as well.
Yeah. You know, you guys chose Danny Elfman too. I was surprised to learn that, is it Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo was the original name, and they had it was almost like they told musical theater type stories, which is fascinating to me. It was his brother's band, and they did these very theatrical presentations that had a narrative from beginning to end. So when we think of these guys as coming from bands, it was a band, but in a way they were telling these long format narrative stories, and they were scoring them, and it had a through line, it had acts and scenes and things like that. So that seems like what the job of a film composer is. So in a way, Danny kind of seems like he came back home to this role that he did earlier. Why did you guys choose him?
I think mostly for just the same reasons. As an LA kid myself, definitely like Oingo Boingo was just like one of the big through lines through like listening to K-rock growing up. I don't know how popular they were in the rest of the country or the rest of the world. I mean, I know that they were popular. They were featured prominently on like a bunch of like soundtracks. Talk about soundtracky life. Ryan's, I mean, like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, they were kind of like the big capper song at the end. I think that they also had like music on, what was the one about Back to School?
Back to School, Weird Science, obviously.
Obviously Weird Science. You know, Danny Elfman has such an interesting relationship with the music industry, with his brother, and making kind of that, what's it called, Forbidden Zone, that kind of extension of the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, kind of street performance ensemble, whatever it was, that he's just like kind of been this thing. It's this huge LA thing that's just been for so long.
Yeah.
And I also think that he is on our list because can you think of another artist outside of like John Williams and Steven Spielberg that is so just connected to a director and filmmaker like him and Tim Burton? I mean, all but like two of Tim Burton's films have been scored by Danny Elfman, from the silly stuff like Pee-wee's Big Adventure to his more dramatic stuff. It's just like there is a visual aspect of Tim Burton and there is an audio aspect of Tim Burton, and the audio aspect is all Danny Elfman. And whether it's like kind of like the kind of those kind of jingling Christmas bell type stuff, or like the very light and airy stuff that gets very dark and so dramatic. I mean, he is just so supreme at this stuff, from superheroes to Pee Wee Herman, and it's just like he captures it all just so well.
I do want to know if he can do stuff that doesn't say, hey, this is Danny Elfman, because like you said, the chimey stuff, maybe with the choir in the background, it always feels to me like he is letting us know at all times that he is Danny Elfman, and he's also, I think, a composer people choose for strong characters: Spider-Man, Batman, Bart Simpson, Milk.
Harvey Milk.
No, like I think there's some scores where he's kind of laying back and he's not creating these themes that are so gothic and dominating and overwhelming. But I love the dude. What are you gonna say, Ryan?
I think Good Will Hunting is a good kind of counterpoint to kind of the more dramatic stuff that he's done. Especially the main artist on the Good Will Hunting soundtrack is Elliott Smith, and you can't really just blast, you can't really be really dramatic with the score and then have an Elliott Smith song play. You have to kind of play with that, and he even did kind of an orchestral version of Between the Bars, which is an Elliott Smith song, and it's just strings, and it's really gorgeous. So he can kind of play both sides, even though he may be more famous for kind of the bigger sound.
Yeah, I find that interesting. What does a member of a band do? Sometimes they have to kind of blend in, and it kind of it's not their job necessarily to always be rocking out and standing out. They have to kind of hear the rest of the band and go with the flow. So it sounds like you've given an example of where he can kind of pull back and not be so audacious in the storytelling. But yeah, I imagine if you're a Tim Burton and you don't want the score to be lost, or you want to try to create something, an environment that has as much character as Johnny Depp with a top hat and dentures, you've got to have a Danny Elfman there. So that's a fun choice. And it looks like we are we've gone even more than our halftime, because there have been two similar choices between our two competitors. There, Danny Elfman and Trent Reznor has been chosen by both Ryan Pak and the Man Winfield, Freddie Winfield combo there. So that's super cool. But we've also got Michael and Richard's choice of Daft Punk for the Tron Legacy score in there. So we're going to go into our halftime, and this is normally when we espouse the virtues of going back into the archives and download, listening, rating, and reviewing the past episodes. And then we also, during this part, we're going to invite you to go out into social media, to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and speak your mind on our episodes, the ones you liked, the ones you didn't, and then topics for future episodes, the ones you'd like to hear. It's normally when we do all that, but I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to ask Ryan Pak to do that for his podcast, to tell us where people can find the podcast. I happen to know it's on Spotify, Apple Music, and probably everywhere else good podcasts can be found. But where can they connect with you?
So you can find me on Instagram. The handle is SoundtrackCast. You can also go to our website, which is www.soundtrackyourlife.net. We post playlists every week with the episode, so if you want to hear more of the bands that we talk about in the episode, my friend creates a playlist both for Apple Music and Spotify. Since we can't really play music during the episodes, we kind of create a playlist of like a curated playlist of music that we talk about every week.
Cool. Okay, so this is a Danny Elfman soundtrack to a big comic book film, and we're in the origin part of the film. This is where
no, that's
and where did Ryan Pak first come into contact with the soundtrack, or where did young Ryan look up and see that discussing soundtracks to films was going to be important in his life?
So I grew up with an older sister who got an internship at a record label, so she ended up giving me a lot of soundtracks when I was younger, oftentimes soundtracks to movies I had never seen. And then when I got into college at UC Irvine, I was a film major, so it was kind of a natural marriage between the two. And it's a fun and it's fun to talk about soundtracks, because you can either talk about just music, or you can also talk about movies. You can go in so many directions, and there's rarely a person who can say I don't like movies or music.
I know a guy. I like that. Yeah, he's a jerk. So
that's a red flag right there.
I don't know that we have gotten into this, but in a way, we're remarking at the oddity of individuals who enter the world of creating soundtracks for films or scores, yet they come not from an academic music background, but a band background. But I want to know, are we going to discuss folks like a T-Bone Burnett who worked with the Coen brothers to come up with all the the songs that the Big Lebowski is boogieing around to in that film, or there's some guys who just populate films with cool songs. Hey, I got this cool Dylan pull for this song. Are we going to talk about those people for those types of films?
I don't have any on our list.
Okay.
I would like to be that guy, though. I feel like that I would be uniquely qualified to do that. Not that I have any qualifications for it, but I just feel like I'd be really good at it. So if anybody's listening that can hire me to just suggest songs for scores.
To curate a cool... Yeah.
Yes, soundtrack curator.
Yeah, okay, cool.
I can do that.
You can do that. You totally could do that. So I think
one of mine is adjacent to a soundtrack supervisor that I'll probably talk about.
Why don't you bust that one out right now while we go into our second half, Ryan Pak?
All right, so the third composer for me on Mount Rushmore is Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo.
Oh, love it. Cool.
Also on our list.
Are you serious?
We're very simpatico today.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Starting with Ryan, why did you choose Mark?
He's done a bunch of movies that I love. He's also done some stuff for TV, so he is the composer of the Rugrats theme.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, also co-wrote the Pee-wee's Playhouse theme.
That's right.
Sung by Cyndi Lauper, which I didn't realize until I was doing the research on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Under an assumed name.
Are you a fan of his scores, or are you just a fan of the idea of this guy from a bonehead, pseudo-punk new wave band out of Ohio doing this kind of thing? What's attractive about Mark Mothersbaugh?
He did the first 4 Wes Anderson films, and I'm a huge Wes Anderson fan.
Oh, yeah. I love that kind of pseudo-Baroque stuff that he does for Tenenbaums and Rushmore. It almost feels like if Mozart was sitting down to write a minuet for these dysfunctional characters. They're a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love it. Oh, go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
He's great with... I feel like every Wes Anderson movie is kind of like a play, or I think even he kind of plays on, like Tenenbaums has a narrator like it's a book. Mm-hmm. And then Rushmore, since Max is kind of this prodigy playwright, you can kind of read Rushmore as a play. So he's really good at kind of playing into that. I recently did an episode for The Life Aquatic, actually. So that was the last of the 4 Wes Anderson films that Mark Mothersbaugh scored. And that one kind of has those Baroque elements, but then he has a song on there called Ping Island, which is kind of the song that's playing in Bill Murray's head. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like this cheap Casio, like electronic song that they turn into like to this big obnoxious orchestra thing during a big action scene later in the film. So I feel like there's like his humor in the music, while you may not hear like Devo in his scores. Like he's done mostly comedies, and I think it's because like Devo always had that biting humor in their music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that even when he went and did a big budget Hollywood blockbuster, I mean, it was Thor Ragnarok. So that was even a movie where I think the humorous aspects of his soundtracking were able to come to the forefront. I mean, obviously he had to maybe flex some muscles that maybe previously he hadn't in terms of scoring these big action scenes, and you need to do that credibly. But at the same time, I think that if you listen to the soundtrack and you watch the movie, there's a lot of kind of humorous notes, mm-hmm. because it is as much a comedy as it is an action film. And
for sure, yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think we're all of us here are big Wes Anderson fans, and I love the Tenenbaum score particularly because it's basically telling these stories of these very different siblings, and so his score kind of has to underscore the different personalities of all these characters, and I think it does a really great job of that, and I think that the score really accents these curated pieces of the, from Wes Anderson's perspective, what he's able to bring in terms of the rock and pop songs that he's using as part of the soundtrack. I think that creates I think it creates additional pressure on the film composer to be able to kind of match that and be able to work with those pieces. I mean, you've got other audio elements that you're basically competing with. And I think he does a great job with it.
Yeah. I see these guys as outsiders. They are people who, well, some of them are very established now. Danny Elfman is very established, and so is Mark Mothersbaugh. But they were originally people that were brought in by new filmmakers who came out of the indie world who wanted to do something different, and they wanted a different sound. And Mothersbaugh, I love how much he has kind of relished in that outsider identity, and hearing about some of his earlier, even commercial work, where for a jingle for Pepsi, he would have a backwards vocal saying "sugar is bad for you and gives you diabetes" in the commercial, and play it for the ad agency, and they would go like this, like, "Dude, you're so rad. We're so glad we have this kind of terrorist who has come into the fold of the industry to kind of shake things up a little bit." So yeah, I think it's fun when I think of you also, Ryan, you guys have both all brought up these directors of these long relationships with these musicians, these composers have a long relationship with the director, Elfman and Burton and Mothersbaugh and Anderson. And I imagine after their second film, whenever they're going like this or writing the script, they're imagining what the composer's going to do.
Sure,
Yeah.
Especially for, I think, those composers who are very attuned to music anyway.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Mothersbaugh, I just rewatched Rushmore, and he's so great at moving characters from one place to another. The frenetic pace of Mount Rushmore. Max can't graduate school because he can't sit still long enough to do homework. He's got to be in one club or another, or cribbing, a feature film into a supposed hit play. And I love the movement that Mothersbaugh creates for this kid who's just kind of running from responsibility throughout the whole thing. So fun. So really, there's just one choice left. Am I right? That
it's just Ryan's last pick. We're
okay.
done. We're out of
All right.
here. We're
okay, well, guys,
we're a ghost.
We're a ghost.
So, just let us know that we won, and Ryan will go through the motions and blah 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 as we usually have.
So Ryan, what's your last choice?
Well, can I add one last thing about Mothersbaugh?
Sure.
Of course.
Since you all, so unlike Elfman, who kind of just scores the whole thing, Mothersbaugh has been working with Wes Anderson, and he has to kind of work around these classic rock songs that are in every film.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's David Bowie songs, whether I think Rolling Stones are in both Rushmore and Tenenbaums. So he has to kind of work around the edges. And the guy who picks these classic rock songs with Wes Anderson, his name is Randall Poser. Or is it Poster? Randall Poster? Randall Poster.
I hope it's Randall Poser, because that actually sounds... I like that a little more.
I believe it's Randall Poster. So there's so through those films, Rushmore, Royal Tenenbaums, and The Life Aquatic, there's this synergy between the three of them, not just between the director. It's between the director, the soundtrack supervisor, and the film composer in that scenario. And he does a great job. I think Randall threw him kind of a cool nod in Life Aquatic. It's the last film that he did with the two of them. There's actually a Devo song on the soundtrack.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they use Gut Feeling, yeah.
That's cool. Is Randall Poster the one responsible for putting Fortunate Son in every Vietnam film ever?
No, I think Randall likes to have a little bit more nuance than that.
Okay.
So he also is the go-to soundtrack supervisor for Todd Phillips, who's not exactly known for music, but apparently Todd Phillips really likes working with him.
I love he works for Scorsese, and he's like saying, how about, I don't know, maybe Gimme Shelter, or maybe something from the Shirelles right here. What do you think?
That's a great idea. I really love it. Yeah, that's a great idea.
It's interesting. That's actually, sorry, before we move on, it's an interesting thing to think of, like these rock star musicians who've gone on to be composers that are suddenly having to compete, in a sense, within their movie with like pop music. Like as Ryan said, so much of like Rushmore or Royal Tenenbaums is built on like this kind of dual soundtrackness. There's a all of a sudden the Ramones hit, and then you're back to like tinkling on a piano, and it's like it's very frenetic. It's very, you have to really be able to understand like these two aspects of filmmaking and to make it feel kind of all connected. I remember having the Royal Tenenbaums soundtrack, and it goes from having punk songs, and then you're into a nice little Mothersbaugh tune, and then it goes into another rock song, and then you're back. And so when you're listening to like an actual soundtrack of an album, it's not all like the first Batman film. It's not all like you buy one album, it's Danny Elfman, and then you buy another album and it's like Bat Dance, which is just weird. It's when sometimes you're listening to like a soundtrack to a film, and it's like this mix of two different things. And I think he and especially with like Rushmore or Tannenbaum's really able to blend those two things. And I wonder if there's just some sort of aspect or some, because you've been in that industry, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm reaching a little bit. I think there's something special that happens when the two things blend together so well.
Was Randall Poster your last choice, Brian?
No, I just wanted to bring up Randall Posters.
Oh, cool.
With Mothersbaugh. My last choice is actually Jonny Greenwood.
Who's that?
He's the guitarist from Radiohead, and he's always been paired with Paul Thomas Anderson.
Oh, wow, cool.
So
what do you like about Jonny Greenwood?
So I'm a big Radiohead fan, and then the first Paul Thomas Anderson film he did was There Will Be Blood, and I just remember like these chugging orchestras that create like this incredible tension throughout the whole film. Like it almost feels like you're listening to a horror score in a movie that is, I mean, it's kind of a thriller, I guess, in a way. Like
it is kind of a horror film in some ways. I mean, if you get down to the
where the monster is human greed.
Yeah, literally.
You think that's something that a guy like Trent Reznor seems like also kind of specializes in creating these soundscapes that aren't necessarily melody driven, but they do create an emotion. Is that what Jonny Greenwood does?
Well, every Paul Thomas Anderson movie has been pretty different, so he has to kind of cater to the subject matter. But I remember There Will Be Blood especially, just feeling this huge, just churning tension in my stomach, and it's because of the score of the film. The last pairing, or the last film that they did together, Phantom Thread, it's a really beautiful classical score. He's a little bit different than Reznor because he is fine with just using like the orchestral score. Reznor is kind of more in his wheelhouse where he's going to use his synthesizers and a lot of piano because that's kind of his main instrument. Though he kind of plays everything in Nine Inch Nails except he'll bring in outside drummers. But Greenwood, he's okay with using kind of the more orchestral score, but still creating sounds that maybe you wouldn't expect, kind of like his guitar playing in Radiohead.
Yeah. So I think it's been a super fun conversation. Is there any parting comments, gentlemen? Richard and Michael, anything you want to try to do to get an edge up over Ryan Pak before we get to the scoring?
Well, we already stole so
Unintended?
many of his choices. We already stole so many of his choices. I don't know what else I could possibly do.
You know what I think is kind of interesting is I almost feel like the creation of a classically influenced score is something that rock welcomed into its arms in the kind of with guys like Brian Wilson and Lennon, McCartney, of course, George Martin started to kind of welcome this orchestra, and of course, like the Stones a little bit later. And then about that same time, films were starting to have more pop music in it. I think in the 50s with like Blackboard Jungle and things like that. But obviously, even earlier, we think of pop music, I think of like rock. But people in bands, obviously, like you couldn't have like a Fred Astaire film or an Al Jolson film without having some kind of band music in that too. So there's always been band music in films, but it's interesting for me the kind of cross-pollination between the two. And even a guy like John Barry. John Barry was a very successful jazz dude for a long time before getting into the cinema composition. I also remember listening to Paul McCartney talk about after the Beatles wanting to do movie music because every pop star wanted to have the song in a Bond film. So it's fascinating to me how much they've always had an eye for each other's work. So
we should mention with Jonny Greenway, by the way, his most famous, or maybe his biggest contribution to the world of film scores and film music would be one of the Weird Sisters in the Harry Potter movies.
He was a Weird Sister?
There is the most famous wizard band in the world is called the Weird Sisters. And they play I believe it's the Yule Ball in one of the Harry Potter. I think it's Goblet of Fire. And
that's cool.
And it's like this all-star cast. I know
Jarvis Cocker.
Jarvis Cocker from Pulp is the lead singer, and it's just sort of like this all-star, like it's almost Britpop sort of group that came together to do these like goofy songs for this Harry Potter movie.
Yeah, if only I didn't have both songs called "Do the Hippogriff" and I forget the name of the other one on my my iPod, my iPhone. I know these exactly.
Yeah. Okay, dude. So this has been a very fun topic. Before I designate the 4 choices that'll be on the Mount Rushmore, Ryan, I want you to let folks know what the next episode is that's going to be coming out. Let us know what to expect for Soundtrack Your Life podcast.
The next episode we are doing is the soundtrack to the 1984 film Purple Rain, which I'm sure everyone knows.
Nice.
Wow. That's pretty awesome.
And I interviewed someone who actually saw it in the theater.
Oh, well, you're talking to one of those guys right now, bro. That's cool. Okay, cool. So he mentioned a few past episodes. I'm going to look through and look at some previous episodes. Airheads with Edgar Rodriguez. He's a frequent guest, am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. Xanadu with Tracy Lane.
That was a fun one.
Why was it fun, dude?
Because Xanadu is considered the worst film of all time.
It's a horrible film, yeah.
It's a batshit crazy movie, but
yeah, it's more ridiculous than bad.
But I do think the soundtrack is actually I don't know if it's underrated, but I mean, I think it's
Jeff Lynne.
It's Jeff Lynne CLO. I mean, you can't really go wrong with it.
Mm-hmm. We've got Dogs in Space. What's that? You and Edgar talk about.
It's a 1987 indie Australian film that stars Michael Hutchence from INXS.
Wow, cool.
Wow.
Okay.
It's directed by the big INXS music video director Richard Lowenstein.
Oh, cool. All right, Ryan. I appreciate you coming on the show, and I appreciate our audience checking out Soundtrack Your Life podcast. So many good episodes. And now is the time we get to applaud you both for all your great taste, choosing what is kind of the trinity here, at least 2 of them, Danny Elfman, Mark Mothersbaugh. So those 2 guys are going to go up on the Mount Rushmore. And what the heck? How about this new kid, Trent Reznor? He did win an Oscar along with Atticus Jones. And why don't we go ahead and add Jonny Greenwood to that? So you win by 1, Ryan, I appreciate you being on the podcast, and congratulations. With that, you get the huge trophy that we present.
Yes.
to
the
winners.
wreath, the giant wreath that we stole from Santa Anita Park, the horse racing track.
This Laurel and Hardy handshake. So thank you so much. One more time, remind us of the social handles. Instagram where?
Soundtrack Cast.
Okay, cool. And on that, and you also have somebody could probably kind of follow you out on Apple Music and on Spotify. Is that right?
Yes, please subscribe. We're on Apple Music, Spotify, and pretty much every major podcasting platform.
And you don't play any music on your podcast because that's illegal? Is that right?
I think it's kind of like gray area.
Oh, we live in that gray area, man.
We ride it. We're riding the gray area like a.
I think as long as you're talking over it, it's okay. I don't remember the legalese. I was just like, we'll just do something separate for that.
We'll tell it to the judge, enter an indictment. Okay, this has been the Mount Rushmore podcast, particularly the Mount Rushmore of film composers who were in bands. And I, as always, am Jeff.
I'm Richard.